Hey, my friends, there's new news coming out of the Holy Land where, as you know, things are happening and there's a warlike situation. But what you don't really know is the persecution of the Christian community that's going on. Late breaking news of an 18-year-old who died on the safe zone, the strip where they are supposed to be able to walk. When people came to give her aid, they were shot at by Israeli snipers. I have someone with us who can give us detail because you all remember Jason Jones, who helped people get out of Afghanistan when there was tensions there, out of Ukraine, and many LifeSite supporters helped him to do that, helped his organization to do that. And he's doing it again, doesn't that figure? But he's doing it again in Gaza, where many Christians are trying to leave because they're getting killed. We're going to get into all of that right now. Jason, thank you so much for joining us.
John-Henry, thank you for making time for this.
So, Jason, tell us, what is going on over there right now?
Yeah, well, it's absolutely catastrophic. 80% of all Christian houses have been destroyed. 4% of the Christian community has been killed. Most of them were killed while sheltering in the last church in Gaza. And what people have to remember is this is the oldest Christian community in the world. This was the community that was founded by St. James himself. So these are the descendants of the families that would have been the families that Jesus Christ himself knew. And what's startling to me as somebody who, our mission is to serve the most vulnerable people in the world when the world has abandoned them: Christians, Jews, Muslims, Yazidis, others. But that the Christian community in the world has forgotten the first Christian community in the world, and their moment of incredible suffering, to me, is unbelievable. I can't put words to it. And I can tell you, for the Christians in Gaza that the Vulnerable People Project is in daily communication with, they're used to the evangelical Christians forgetting about them or pretending that they don't exist. But what's sorrowful is it seems that so many Catholics are now forgetting that they exist or indifferent to their plight.
So it beggars the imagination, but what are you getting from them? What's happening on the ground? Because there's a lot of disbelief. A lot of people are saying, oh, it's not that bad, and blah, blah, blah. But what is it for real? You're talking to the Catholics there. You're talking to these ancient Christians who are from literally the times of Christ, the descendants of the first Christians in the world. And there they are. What are they telling you that's happening?
Well, at Holy Family Catholic Church, the last parish there are 800 people sheltering in place. That community was directly bombed. You also had two Christian women, I believe that you covered this story, two Christian women, a mother and a daughter, who were on their way into the church. They were shot by IDF snipers. You had the Missionaries of Charity's Home for Unwanted, Discarded, and Mentally Ill Children that was was under direct rocket attack from the IDF. You have a community that's starving to death, facing severe famine. Yeah, it's hell on earth. VPP, we're working now in the Philippines, serving a community under ISIS attack. We're working in India with the rise of Hindu nationalism and the brutality against the Christians there. Of course, we work in Central Asia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iran. But our heart breaks that our ally, Israel, is behaving in such a brutal way, using our taxpayer dollars and using our weapon systems to slaughter the first century Christian community of Israel, of Gaza.
That's going to sound really controversial for some people, but just so that everyone knows, LifeSite spoke directly with one of the auxiliary bishops there in Jerusalem, who was telling us of this brutality. He was the one we did the interview with, who explained about the sniper shooting of the two Catholic women by the Israeli Defense Forces. Also, you have this mass starvation going on. You've got another incident for us. Now, we're going to show some of these images. I would say viewer discretion advised, but you need to see what's happening. Tell us what happened, Jason.
Okay, so the one, it's brutal. John-Henry, you have to know this is sadly what I have to look at every day, not just from in Gaza, but from our work around the world, and it can be a bit overwhelming. But these photos are of a young girl who, with her sister, was going to get food that had been airdropped. And then they were hit with white phosphorus, what appears to be white phosphorus, which would be a war crime. As you can see, I don't know how much of it you're going to show. We'd like you to please do. We evacuated this young girl and her family to a hospital in Egypt. But as you can see, every square inch of her body, her face, her arms, every part of her body is covered in burns. This is it's just unimaginable. It's
For those
heartbreaking.
unfamiliar, what is white phosphorus?
It's a weapon that just gets under your skin and it burns your skin, as you can see the burns there.
What was this? Now you mentioned this was twin girls. This is one of the girls in the shot. What happened to the other one?
Her sister died immediately, I believe was immediately.
How old are these girls?
I believe they're 9. She's 9.
Okay. Is this is this abnormal, or is this now life for them?
There are 14,000 children that have been killed in Gaza. 14,000 children have been killed in Gaza. 50% of Gaza is children, 50%. And we now have over 14,000 casualties that you can see. Have the Secretary of State of the United States or Israeli spokespersons flood into the American media saying that this has been the most precise war, that they've taken greater precautions than any military in history to prevent civilian casualties. That's absolutely absurd. It's absolutely absurd. First of all, if they were taking these, then the other talking point is that Hamas is using them as human shields. That is also not true. That is a talking point. Whenever there's a civilian casualty, they jump to and say, well, Hamas was using them as a human shield. Well, how do you know that? They say that again and again and again. Every civilian casualty, I guess every one of those 14,000 children was a human shield for Hamas. But then when you talk to the community in Gaza, that is absolutely not the case. And it's most definitely not the case with the young woman whose images we just saw of her covered in burns. And it's not the case with Lara, the 18-year-old Christian girl who dropped probably of heat stroke. And then on her way on the quote unquote safe route, and she's a Christian young woman. And then when Palestinian Muslims went to rescue her and give her aid, give her water, care for her, they were shot at. So this is not the instance of Palestinian Muslims using a Christian girl as a human shield. Actually, Palestinian Muslims were running to help a Christian girl and being shot at by the IDF. And it happens again and again, day after day. And it's going to continue to happen until the Christians in the West raise up their voice and say, enough is enough. Enough with the killing of civilians. We need a ceasefire immediately. This is an absolute disgrace.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen these horrific images coming through from even from UN sources of starving children and just in deplorable states like you can't imagine. Is that the reality from the ground as well, that you're hearing from the Christians that this is actually happening? So it's not fake news.
Oh, no, it's the reality. Let me say this, John-Henry. We actually evacuated people behind Russian lines after the invasion. We were able to get people out from behind Russian lines in the first weeks of the war when Russia invaded Ukraine. We just evacuated a religious community from Sudan this past June when the civil war broke out. Of course, we're constantly evacuating religious minorities and our former allies from Afghanistan. We're pretty good at our job. Gaza is extremely challenging to get food in, to get medicine in, to get people out. It's incredibly difficult. We've never faced anything like this. It's the greatest challenge that we've ever faced. It seems like it's an insurmountable challenge. And each person that we get out or each little bit of aid that gets in, we feel like it's a great success. But then at the same time, I feel a bit embarrassed, because what does this really mean? It doesn't seem, obviously it means a lot to the people you rescue, but we feel as an organization, it's so challenging. It's so daunting. And what I don't understand, John-Henry, is, I've been a critic. I was a critic of Obama's drone war. I wrote sort of an iconic piece over 10 years ago called Flying into the Abyss, John Brennan's drone war, where I detailed in depth. I had leaked to me the names and ages of children across the world that died in U.S. drone strikes. I was celebrated for that piece by conservative Christians. I've been always celebrated for standing up for civilians that have faced violence, even at the hands of our own government, like the Obama's drone war, or our ham-fisted withdrawal when I criticized Biden for our ham-fisted withdrawal and the hell on earth that we unleashed on the people of Afghanistan. Or when I criticized Obama for his withdrawal from Iraq and ISIS was unleashed, erasing the first century Christians and Yazidis from the country, I was commended. But when I speak out against the destruction of the people of Gaza, and even when I am highlighting, and by the way, we're a Catholic apostolate, but we protect the vulnerable. We don't look to see your baptismal records, you know. I don't need to see your baptismal record. Sometimes people reach out to us and say, well, we're not Catholic. I'm like, well, we're not checking, you know, you're good. We got you. But even when I highlight the plight of the Christian community in Gaza, there's absolute indifference. And I don't understand. I can't wrap my mind around it. And the reality is that if we speak out clearly, if our voice, this would stop. There would be a ceasefire. You have these strange characters acting childish on college campuses. You see the anti-Semites and the Jew haters that are trying to use this, the behavior of the Israeli government to stir up Jew hatred and anti-Semitism. You see their voice being heard, but you're not hearing the middle. You're not hearing the voice of people who all of us should be authentically concerned for the plight of the civilians in Gaza. But you're not hearing any voice from the middle speaking out. It's mysterious to me. But again, it was the same thing. It was the same thing in Iraq. It was the same thing in Syria. It seemed to be we weren't for whatever reason, we don't feel a connection to the families who shared the gospel of Jesus Christ through their missionaries that eventually reached our ancestors. We just don't feel a connection with them. But if we were to raise our voice, there would be a ceasefire immediately. There would be a ceasefire immediately.
How can people raise their voices, and how can people support your efforts to rescue Christians out of or Christians and those who need it out of Gaza?
Well, we have a petition, ceasefirenow.org, where we can give you that petition. But also thanks to you again, John-Henry, just like Afghanistan, when you saw our work, you came alongside and asked us to start a Life Funder. That Life Funder was foundational to our evacuations in Afghanistan. We've been so overwhelmed, I didn't even think to reach out to you about a Life Funder, and you suggest that we do a Life Funder. We have a queue. It's sort of like Afghanistan all over again. We have a queue. We work in triage. We're evacuating the most vulnerable, the most severely wounded out of Gaza as fast as we can, and we're seeking to get aid in. We're also seeking to reunite families and to care for them once we get them into Egypt. And also if you're a conservative Catholic, and I don't want to get into the theology of it all because it's a very strange theology that has infected the minds of evangelical Christians that is now bleeding into the Catholic community that seems harmless in normal times, but in war, it leads them to be absolutely and utterly indifferent to the sufferings of the people of Gaza. And I want to mention this, John-Henry, the people of Israel are quite commendable. So many former IDF soldiers have come forward and talked about the use of AI and how the use of AI has led to an increase in civilian casualties. The protests, there are these massive protests in Israel where the people of Israel are condemning the government for its behavior. And the last thing that we want to see is we do not want our standing with the people of Gaza to foment anti-Semitism or Jew hatred, but we don't want our fear of being criticized to silence us to what really seems to be an anti-Arab prejudice that has muffled us for speaking up for Arabs. So this is the beauty of being a Catholic and the grace that I think my heart broke on October 7th for what happened to those civilians. And in fact, the first thing VPP did that day is there were groups of Jewish communities in Africa that were suffering extremist violence. I hit the green light to provide security for those Jewish communities in Africa, along with the Catholic and other ecclesial communities that we provide security for that are vulnerable to extremist attack. And so when I see the idea that a Jewish student walking across Harvard Yard has to be accosted by a mob because an American student who's Jewish gets accosted by a mob as he's walking across a college campus is absolutely shameful, and it's despicable. But at the same time, it is shameful and despicable that we are indifferent to the sufferings of the people of Gaza. And why? Why? Why is that? Why are we indifferent? Is it because they're Arab? Is it because they're predominantly Muslim? What is it that has silenced us? But I will tell you this, as a Catholic with the Catholic Apostolate, the Vulnerable People Project, our mission is to stand with the most vulnerable people in the world when the world is silent. We were there in Iraq. I was there on the ground in Iraq during the rise and spread of ISIS, advocating for and communicating on behalf of the Christians in Iraq. We were the first organization, one of the first organizations I know in the West to advocate for the Uyghur before the world was aware of the Uyghur genocide. We fought for the Yazidis, and we're going to stand with the people of Gaza. And this is going to be a shame for the government of Israel, for the Netanyahu regime. But in no way should we hold the people of Israel accountable for the behavior of their government any more than the people of Gaza should be held accountable for the behavior of Hamas. No more should American students who are Jewish or American students who are Arab or Palestinian or Muslim, should they suffer because of what governments are doing on the other side of the world. What our mission is as Catholics, what our vocation is in this broken world, primarily, of course, for all of us, is to love God and to love our neighbor, to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. But it's to be at the cross. It's to be at the cross. It's to stand with the vulnerable when the world has abandoned them. And then when we do that, it's challenging. But what that does is that it exemplifies the truth and dignity and beauty of the human person that Jesus Christ made known to the world. That is what we're called to do. And when we muzzle ourselves because of prejudice, when we muzzle ourselves because of fear of retribution, when we muzzle ourselves because of the war enthusiasms that happen with every war, people get swept away time and time and time again, war after war after war. And then getting swept away in war enthusiasms leads to prejudice and bigotry and cruelty and violence. And then who suffers? Women and children. And who's suffering in Gaza predominantly? Obviously, it's women and children, but we care for the men too. We care for all the civilians in Gaza. We care for the people of Israel. We want a humane, beautiful world. We want to leave to our children a culture of life and a civilization of love. But we cannot do that by turning a blind eye to the suffering of the people of Gaza. We cannot do that. And as Catholics, if the rest of the world gets swept away by tribalism or prejudice, let them. But what I will do is I'll stand with the vulnerable. Again, I'm not checking their baptismal records. I'm not asking their ethnicity. But when I see women and children suffering, families suffering, well, the Apostle of the Vulnerable People Project is to stand with them. And that's what I believe that we as Catholics are called to do. But we also have to be the leaders in doing it in a way that does not foment tribalism, bigotry, or hatred.
Amen to that. Jason Jones, thank you so much for what you're doing. Please go to lifefunder.com and support Jason's work with the Vulnerable People Project and this work in Gaza. God bless you, my friend.
Thank you, John Henry.
And God bless all of you. We'll see you next time.